Okay, so continuing with process costing, we'll make sure we have time to talk about some 5-2 problems. I'll take a little break. We'll need a break. I think it'll be useful to have a break. And we can kind of come back later if we run out of 5-2 questions we have, because 5-2 is due tomorrow at the end of the day. All right, so chapter 6 here. Anybody win a car? Did you keep counting the little GIF here? Or did I just break your brain because it's called a GIF? I'm sorry if that offends you. It's just easier for me to say. For me, I don't know. The soft G. No one wants to win a car? Okay. You didn't sitting for hours staring at my textbook? It just turns ones. Nobody answered. Man, you could have won a car. It's about the level of humor today. I'm sorry. That's about what I can offer. Just to set expectations correctly here. All right. So we talked about the idea that we have to create some equivalent units when we're doing process costing. So we're trying to divide. We start with the idea. Well, let's divide overhead by units. Well, okay. Some of the units aren't done in ending work in process, ending WIP, EWIP. Okay, well, we can create equivalent units and imagine, well, say we didn't have like 100 units that were 25% complete. What if we instead concentrated that work so that we completed as many as possible? We would have completed 25 units. So the number of units, 100, times their percent completion, 25%, leads to 25 equivalent units. So, okay, that's an idea. We can use that as our ending WIP number as if we had 25 worth completed units in ending work in process and use that as our denominator to divide overhead. Okay, well, we've kept the idea. Well, then we get to the idea of, well, you know what? If we're dividing overhead by unit, we have some sort of a continuous piece of production, some continuous process of production, process being a key part of the word here, a key phrase. That's why it's in the title of the method. We might as well just take all product costs. Why bother tracing the direct things? Probably not economical, and this is why companies do go to process costing, because it's not even economical to trace direct materials and direct labor to these individual product units. If I use the example of a marble factory, if you want, maybe a paper factory is another one. One piece of paper is like another piece of paper, and by using that example, now I've given you excuses to go watch more Office reruns. And so, because they're a paper company, right? So yeah, one piece of paper is like another piece of paper, like another piece of paper. You're not going to name them. You're not going to title them. It's not like one piece of paper in this ream of 500 pieces of paper uses a significantly different amount of direct materials. And if it did, like it used 0.001 more ounces of pulp, it's not worth the price of that 0.001 ounces of pulp to track that from a decision-making point of view. So yeah, you know what? If we're in the situation, probably we should take all product costs and trace them in the same way. Just take them in the numerator, put them in the numerator, and divide them by number of equivalent units, because we know we can't just use normal units. Can't use physical units. We've got to create equivalent units. And we can get product cost per equivalent unit, but that's not quite good enough because, yes, we're not going to trace them, but if we're being honest, often there is non-uniform completion. We have all the direct materials in, but we don't have all the process of conversion complete yet. That often is the case. The paper airplane example is a classic one. How many of you in say 206 made paper airplanes? No one made paper airplanes? 205? No class, you've made paper airplanes? The first semester done that? Oh, okay. Well, then I'm going to claim that they've copied it off of me, because in previous semesters in this class, we've done that. I don't really have a plan to do it this time. I'm sorry. You'll have to go back to 206 to do it. So, too bad. But let's say we are a company producing paper airplanes. All right. I would do it, but I think we get 75% of the teaching value in this class, 65%. Let's just lessen that a little bit, from me explaining the idea and you working through problems. And it takes up a fraction of the time. It takes some time to do this activity. Let's say we're doing a paper airplane company. Our job is to take pieces of paper, turn them into paper airplanes. And there are distracted students all over the college here and the university at large who want to buy our paper airplanes because they're just bored. They're out of spitballs. They want paper airplanes to throw instead. All right, so we want to convert raw materials into finished goods. We we have these paper airplanes. Let's say I gave you a minute to do it. What are your favorite paper airplane designs? I like just very classic. I think I fold the corners down at the top and then fold it one more time. And then I don't throw it very far because, they never float very far. I'm kind of lazy. Anybody really good at folding paper airplanes? No? I don't have any stacks of paper. Maybe, how many really want to do this activity? Okay, so a couple people want. Okay, how many not really, but kind of want to do this activity? How many people, if it just gets us out of some class time, want to do this activity? All right, okay. Well, then I have an assignment for Wednesday to bring in some paper, and we can demonstrate some of this, and if it hasn't clicked, maybe it'll click then. So I will write down, bring in 22 innocent trees worth of paper. I'm teasing you. We use like, I like to use, well, I either use like leftovers from last time I did the activity or some other excess. So, for example, the 206 class right now, Joanne was just asking me, asked us to hand in some leftover agenda papers from our meeting we had this morning. So we have a bunch of extra papers. We just reuse them. Paper for Wednesday. All right, well, then I won't go through that explanation. So I'll just explain it boringly so you can have some exciting Wednesday to look forward to. So sometimes there's non-uniform completion of different types of product cost. Usually we divide them into two. We start with this. This is we get to completion number 3. We divide them into 3 actually, but we divide them into 2. We say direct materials and conversion costs kind of are on different tracks, like there are different types of cars. So direct materials often leads or sometimes lags after the conversion process. So one example is like a paper airplane. I'll say a little bit about it. We can do the example of it on Wednesday. But so let's say, for example, we have some leftover paper airplanes at the end of the minute or two we do our paper airplane experiment. Some of them are like half folded, right? You'll be like out, the timer will beep and you'll be partially done with them. But what direct materials go into a paper airplane? Paper. Yeah. So those paper airplanes that are like partially folded, how complete are they with respect to the direct materials that go into them? They're done. They're done. What is not done? The labor, the conversion of them from the raw material into the finished good. So 100% complete with respect to direct materials, and they might be like 25% complete with respect to conversion. And you said labor, so labor is part of conversion costs. Conversion costs. We have our 3 product costs: direct materials, direct labor, and overhead. And these 2 are conversion costs. We could include the example of, let's say we have to get some insurance for paper cuts and overhead costs. So the process of conversion, including direct labor hours required and the portion of overhead required to cover our insurance, paper cut insurance, are costs that haven't been all the way completed. So those paper airplanes are so many percent complete with respect to conversion costs. All right, so now we get out. Here we go. So there's another way in which these things can lag. There are a lot of problems that deal with this idea of direct materials are added like at the beginning of the process, like with a paper airplane. They're 100% complete once the process is even started, because you start with the raw materials and then you convert them into something that's finished. There's another pattern that a number of the problems follow, and I call it the dumpling or the pasta or the macaroni example. So the idea here is sometimes direct materials are all added, but not at the beginning. Sorry, all added at once, but not at the beginning of the process. And dumplings or pasta or macaroni specifically as pasta is an excellent example of this. So let's think about like a dumpling. What direct materials are in the dumpling? You can get as specific as you want. Yeah. Dough. Yeah, some cabbage or veggies if you have it in there. There's sometimes pork or chicken dumplings, things like that. I don't hear a lot of beef dumplings. Are there many beef dumplings out there? I don't feel like I hear that much beef dumplings. This is a business idea for you. Or maybe it's a really bad idea. That's when no one does it. I don't know. Yeah. So you have like your filling, you have your dumpling, the wrapper, like a dough of some kind, right? I think that covers it. Okay, good. So that's your direct materials. What kind of labor is involved with this? You got to make the dumplings. You're in the business of making dumplings. So is there somebody having to make them? Okay, that's a fair point. Like if we're a big company, maybe we have a machine that does it. Does somebody, for now anyway, have to oversee the machine? Someday it will all be automated and will be replaced, and I'll be teaching ChatGPT. And it'll be like, I can't do a paper airplane experiment. I don't have hands. Okay, so we might have some people overseeing machinery, but we don't have machinery. All right, let's draw this out. Okay, so workers, I put a question mark because they might be mostly done machine. So we have like the filling and the dough. Okay, dough and filling, dough exterior and filling inside. What else do you need? How exactly does a dumpling go from, let's say you bought it frozen at the store, you're lazy, you bought it frozen at the store. Do you eat it right then? If you're like me or a barbarian, you just eat it right away. No, we don't. That's not recommended. Your dentist does not want you to do that. It's a bad idea. Okay, what do? Boil water or steam it. Ooh, it's fancy here. You have to heat some water. Typically, that's the procedure here. Now, if you're fancy, you could like put it on a skillet first, get a little sear, maybe some oil. What? I still didn't hear. That's a gyoza. You're getting okay. Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah. There you go. It's different kind of food here. All right. So we have so for example here we're talking about you have to have some sort of heating element, or some sort of heat. So like an electric stove or an open flame, gas stove, whatever, some sort of heat, and that's going to be an overhead cost. Probably not tracking, kilojoules of electricity going to your stove or measures of gas going to your stove directly. We have the water. Also, probably not tracking every ounce of water. So it's probably an overhead cost. And we have here the equipment, because you have some wear and tear on your pots and pans. Okay. So process is you start with it frozen. With this scenario I've said, start with frozen, and it's going to convert into a finished good that is cooked and yummy, to use the technical terminology. But it has all this conversion that has to happen to it. So start the process. What do? We get out the pot of water, the equipment, water costs are overhead. We apply heat. Heating costs probably also overhead. Don't watch the pot. It's part of your job as direct labor. Don't watch it because it won't boil then, right? And then after the water is boiled, at least generally that's the direction, usually that's the process, you add the dumplings. So have they been added at all to the process till like halfway through the process? No. Like your workspace probably just has boiling water, or water that's you're starting to get to boil, move to a boil through the conversion process for like 50% of the process. And then you drop in all the direct materials. Now they've been added to your work in process, and they cook for the remainder of the time. Cook them until delicious, give them to me, and then you're done. Okay, so in this case, I will give you a problem that says something like direct materials are all added at the 50% threshold of conversion costs. So you're going to see, okay, are these ending work in process units 50% complete, or are they less than that or more than that? And if I tell you, ending whip is only 40% complete with respect to conversion costs, that's WRT with respect to, we haven't dropped the dumplings in yet. That means 0% of our direct materials have been added. That's the idea. If I gave you that question set, I'll give you a sentence that says, all direct materials are added at 50% of the way through the process, or something like that. You're to interpret that to mean if this number means that we are 0% complete with respect to direct materials. If I gave you a different number, say, oh, we're 75% complete with respect to conversion costs, well, that now means that we have dropped in the direct materials. They've all been added, so they are 100% complete with respect to direct materials. So one of the ways that I complicate these problems is that I don't give you the percent for direct materials. You're supposed to interpret based on the decision rule given in the fact pattern. Well, what is the percentage? Has it crossed the threshold, if it's a dumpling problem, or has it been started, if it's like a paper airplane problem, because once they're started, all the direct materials have been added at the beginning of the process. And this is what these companies kind of do. They say, well, we're not going to track direct materials, but we might tether direct materials to certain thresholds of conversion costs, either the very beginning or the middle. And I think one day I came up with, I was in some sort of a special Zen state, and I thought of an example in which you add it at the very end. But I've never retraced my steps to that nirvana, so I don't know. There probably is an example where you add direct materials at the very end, but I can't think of it. So we end up with this, and these are indeed equations you'll use. Notice there's no note underneath them saying, don't use these equations. Back up here, there are notes that say that. That say, I'm just doing this for demonstrative purposes. Don't use this equation ever. These two don't have that note. These two are going to be bread and butter for week 1 here, 6-1. So total direct material cost divided by the total equivalent units with respect to direct materials gives us our direct materials cost per equivalent unit, which we can then use to say how many direct materials dollars are where. So I want to jump down to the T accounts and tell you why we want to do this. What we want is we want a low trace method for deciding something. And we'll do so we have this work in process. We know we have incurred a certain amount of direct materials costs and direct labor and overhead costs, the conversion costs. We know we've incurred these. Yeah, that's easy to trace. That's easy. That's already there for us. What we don't know is how much of this goes here and how much of it goes here. And so we need these rates to tell us. We need a rate that tells us how many direct materials dollars there are per equivalent unit, and we can multiply that by equivalent units that have been completed and therefore are going to be credited to work in process and go over to finished goods. It's also a dollar count. And how many direct materials dollars then can be multiplied by the equivalent units in ending WIP and become our dollar amount for ending WIP. Now, you might note it, well, that example I gave of direct materials, because I was talking about direct materials costs per equivalent unit here, that's just a way of dividing these up. This amount will equal the direct materials in these two other amounts. We're just a question of how they split up. That's all we're doing. We should have a conservation of dollars here. We don't lose them for any reason unless there's some sort of waste, but that's a separate issue. Just by process costing, it should go the same. And we come up with conversion costs per equivalent unit, and we do the same thing here. How much conversion cost goes into units completed and transferred out? How much dollars of conversion costs go into the ending work in process? Now, the reason I have this up here is I like to trace my units, the physical units, using a T account, because I find that the logic parallels pretty well with your accounting instincts. So sometimes in a textbook, if you go look online, they'll go through a lot of trouble having you do a schedule or reconciliation of physical units to equivalent units. And that's great. I find this just to be easier to get to the point. So for example, we have a certain number of beginning WIP units, sometimes anyway, a certain number of ending WIP units, And we have a certain number of units started and a certain number of units completed. Okay, we have beginning WIP units. We started so many units. Some units were completed, so we subtract those away from this, and we end up with our ending WIP equivalent units. These are all physical units. They trace the same way as if you were doing dollar amounts and credits and debits and so on and so forth. And basically, if I've got the illustration in my head down here somewhere. Yeah, okay. So this is what we're doing. We're tracing, we have got these costs, beginning WIP and current period costs of some category, direct materials or conversion costs or all together. And we're deciding how much divides up into where. And we've got the two different methods. I'm not going to focus on that right now. We're this week and next week, and everything before the midterm is just about the weighted average method. Let's just focus on that. And the basic idea, let me go back to this. The basic idea is we're going to use these as our denominator in equivalent units form. That's what TEU is. That's what the focus of 6-1 is, to calculate this using the weighted average method. Because it's going to be our denominator that we're going to put this in the numerator of to then multiply out to these two sections, these two places the dollars could go. I like the symmetry of that example. We're trying to get this to there, these two places. So let's use the units in those two places as our denominator. And then just multiply that rate out by actually the equivalent units now, of these two right here. One little wrinkle I kind of glossed over, but we'll come back to that. All right, third complication isn't that big of a deal. Complication number 3 is that we have transfers between departments. So process costing, you could be almost called department costing, because usually it's like a department does a process, and so this department's overhead or product or direct materials, direct labor costs are all pooled together and divided by the units in work in process in that cost. So we end up with, I'll erase everything here, a WIP account for each process, or for each department. Process more or less equals department, in at least how I'm going to refer to them. So we have a WIP account for process A, then a WIP account for process B, and let's just say there are 2, and then they get finished. All right, so what we have to do is we have to be tracing our costs here and divide them up into ending WIP and units completed in department or process A, and then they're going to move over. And these are now our transferred in TI costs for department B. So we end up with a third category of costs here, which isn't that hard to figure out, which is we have our transferred in costs, and we're going to divide them by the total equivalent units with respect to transferred in costs. And we get a number here. So we end up with 3 rates we could be asked to use here. And these 3 rates are going to be the same whether we're using weighted average or FIFO. We just define the numerator and the denominator slightly different under FIFO than we're going to learn here under weighted average. We're going to start with weighted average, and then we have a couple different changes we make with FIFO. We just define total costs in the numerator a little differently, and we define total equivalent units in the denominator a little differently, and we add one little minor step at the end of doing the cost thing. All right, so 6-1, the quiz, focuses on 6.3.1 here, which is the weighted average method equivalent units, figuring out total equivalent units, which is TEU, which is our denominator for each of our rates. It's its own separate section because it's one of the bigger number of calculations we do. Actually, let me give one more rundown. In fact, I'll do this in the Google sheet. I did some typology of questions that 1 week of ABC, and I thought that was worthwhile. So process costing questions. This is kind of the flow. This is the process of process costing. First, we're going to calculate TEU, then we're going to figure out rates, then we're going to apply costs. Those are the three basic categories of question that I'll ask you. And they break down a little bit further than that, but we're going to focus on TEU this week, 6-1. I believe that's I can't recall off the top of my head. I don't think I have rates. Maybe I also have rates in here. Do I ask? Oh, right there's a rate question. The cost per equivalent unit with respect to direct materials. All right, so I put 1 and 2 together there. Oh, where'd it go? I put 1 and 2 together here. So this is weighted average method. We have 6-1, 6-1. So I say these first 2 steps, we're going to cover that this week's quiz. And then 6-2, we talk about applying the costs. Once we have the rates, we can multiply them by equivalent units to figure out where the money is going here. We can multiply it out to get these dollar amounts right here. That's applying the costs. And then we have FIFO, same 3 steps. And I have one more. 6-3, and 6-3, and 6-4. So very similar pattern after the midterm. We're going to go over first 2 steps in the first quiz for FIFO and last step for FIFO in the last quiz. All right, so let's get into this question right here. So we know that the rate in the end is going to be direct materials cost, total direct materials cost, divided by total equivalent units, TEU, with respect to direct materials. That'll give us our rate. Rate meaning the per here is what tells you it's rates. Cost per equivalent unit. We need to figure out how many dollars each equivalent unit deserves of direct materials cost. And we'll do again for conversion costs, and then again for transferred in costs if necessary. Notice, I erased it up. If we're not the first department, some questions will have you interpret this. If we're department 1, we don't have any transferred in costs. There's no prior department. We start the process. Later departments have our transferred in costs, but we don't have any transferred in costs. And not every question is going to be about that. I just have a few in there to keep you honest, if you will. Now, when I set this up, I kind of integrated weighted average and FIFO. Please do skip over the FIFO stuff if you want to focus on weighted average, which you probably do. That's all. We got 4 weeks until we start talking about FIFO stuff. We got 2 weeks of chapter 6-1 and 6-2, and then we have 2 weeks of midterm and midterm review, and we go into FIFO. So the denominator, TEU, is completed units plus ending WIP equivalent units. So see these brackets right here? Together, that tells us ending WIP equivalent units. And I went over this wrinkle earlier, but of course this is also the completed units equivalent units. But they're completed, so they're 100% complete. So equivalent units equals the same as physical units that were completed because they're 100%. So it's 9,260 completed physical units times 1, which gives us 9,260 equivalent units as well. But we end up with total equivalent units because they are both equivalent unit numbers. This one right here is where we might have a percent that's different, and we end up with a different ending WIP equivalent units than we had ending WIP physical units. Okay? I use these terms, units completed, completed units, and units completed and transferred out. I use them interchangeably. When I say units completed and transferred out, one of the advantages of having this term in there is it also tells you kind of where in the T account it's going. It's going to be credited to this WIP account. It's an WIP account is an inventory account, an asset, so it's going to go up with the debit. So if we're transferring them out, it's not in process anymore. We're going to credit that by the dollar amount associated with the completed units, and it's going to be debited over to either the next WIP account for the next department of the process, or next department in the chain, next process or department in the chain, or if we're the last department or process in the chain, debited over to the finished goods account because they've been finished. So let's just talk about this real quick. Looks like some of the questions we'll have. In fact, let's just go find a question about total equivalent units. There we go. All right, so we have beginning inventory consisting of 15,000 units. They're 50% complete with respect to conversion costs. We have ending inventory consisting of 7,500 units, 7,500 units. They're 25% complete with respect to conversion costs. We also started 105,000 units in the period. So what are the total equivalent units with respect to conversion costs using the weighted average method? And all the ones in succession one will say weighted average method. They should. If they do not, or if it's not clear that we're using the weighted average method, either assume that or let me know and I can fix it, move the question over to the FIFO stuff. It should be just that. So we're looking for TEU with respect to conversion costs. Good, we got conversion cost numbers. So we have our first problem here. I'll do it in the Google Sheet again. That's going to leave a paper trail, which will help you if you want to go look it up later. All right, so this is question 2, TEU with respect to conversion costs. So we start with a problem, which is our TEU equation. Does that problem give us units completed? No, it doesn't. I see beginning WIP units. I see units started. I see ending WIP units. So let's go ahead and build. I'll just do this the one time, make it fancy. And then after that, I'll be less fancy. Build ourselves a little T account. For WIP units, this is physical units. I can put physical if you want in here, physical units. We know we started with 15,000. We know we need numlock on. We started with 15,000. These are beginning WIP units, and they are 50% complete with respect to conversion costs. This column right here is going to tell us the percent complete for the different items. We have 105,000 that we started. It's like we added that we debiting them to the WIP account. We put them into process. We started them, and we know we ended with 7,500 that are what 0.25% complete with respect to conversion costs. So to balance this account, we have to have a certain number here, which is our units completed number. Okay, so we have a total of 120,000 right here. This sum of these two right here. I'll write it out. Beginning WIP plus units started This is the equation. If you're not as comfortable with the T account idea, you got these two minus this one. So that should balance now. We had this number we had at the beginning of the period, 15,000, and started, summing to 120,000. That's units beginning WIP plus units started. And we had to have left over 7,500, so subtract that away. And then the remainder has to be the number of units we completed. All right? And I put the note in here. This is all in physical units, not equivalent units. We're just doing all this in physical units right now. We've got a note noted over here, the percent complete, so we can convert to equivalent units when we get there. All right, so now we have units completed. Right there. And ending WIP, in fact, I will not summarize this. I will do ending WIP physical units times ending WIP percent complete. Ending WIP physical units, 7,500, right? Ending WIP percent complete is the 0.25. Oh, we can see, right? 7,500, 25% with respect to conversion costs. This is okay. So we have units completed plus ending WIP times equivalent units. Excuse me. Yeah, not times percent complete for ending WIP. So this is our total equivalent units for this problem. 114,375. Cool. Notice if you never multiplied that 7,500 by 0.25, you end up with 120,000. You just did units completed plus physical units ending WIP, for example. And look, there's a distractor ready for you. I think there's one in here that if you somehow applied the FIFO method, which you won't because we haven't talked about that, but if you work ahead and you learn about FIFO and screw up your brain and you apply that, I think one of the question answers or the answer choices is there as well. Okay. Oh, and look, there's units completed as well. If you just stop there, you're like, oh, I got a number. Woo! Nope, that'll be wrong. Okay, just stop at units completed. TEU equations right here. So this is we are a little less equation happy here than chapter 3, but we care a little more about the equations than in chapters 4 and 5. So these equations are gonna be a little bit more of a role. I'm gonna when I do the problems on here, as much as I can or as I feel is worthwhile to you, I'll try to write out the equation before I start the problem. Questions on what we did here?
Will there ever be a time where we would need that 50% number for the beginning inventory?
Yes, FIFO.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll need it for FIFO. But for everything before the midterm and on the midterm, no. Yeah, I'd love to talk about the theoretical reason, what we're doing with weighted average, but let's just get into how we do it first, and then we can talk theory later. Okay, now in the textbook here, let's full screen that. Let's skip over. So we talked basically we talked through 6.3.1, getting equivalent units, total equivalent units specifically. In weighted average, using this equation right here. Great. This is weighted average, total equivalent units. We're going to skip over 6.3.2 because that's the FIFO stuff. Forget about that. Okay. 6.4, specifically 6.4.1, step number 2, like I said, applying the rates. It's pretty simple. The total cost for whatever category we're talking about, let's say direct materials, just so we have a basis of speaking, is beginning balance direct materials costs plus current period direct materials costs. That would be our total direct materials costs. When looking at this numerator right here, that'd be our beginning WIP direct materials cost, dollar amount, plus our current period direct materials cost, dollar amount. That's the numerator for a weighted average method. It's not too hard. Honestly, you look at this and you'll be like, why are these problems giving me problems? We're doing some addition and some division. Problem is, we have all these definitions. You've got to interpret the fact pattern into the addition and division. And then we have 50,000 different addition and division you have to do in a row in the right order and with the right numbers. So let's look at a problem. I think this rate problem up here probably is pretty good. It's good enough. I'm so nice. Look at that. I gave you total equivalent units for this. I'm asking for the cost per equivalent unit with respect to direct materials. And I gave you total equivalent units with respect to direct materials, 105,000. So if we go back here, I gave you the denominator. That's 105,000. What's what I want? I want that. Yes, this is question 1. Rates, direct materials, or rate. Direct materials rate. So we have TEU already. Move that over. 105,000. Great, that's the denominator. In fact, I will go ahead and, like I said, as promised, I'll say DM rate equals our total DM cost, which is defined as beginning WIP DM cost plus current period DM cost divided by TEU. We have TEU, so we just need these two right here. Beginning WIP DM cost, current period DM cost. Can we fill these in? So, yeah. Maybe he's trying to trick me. Not this time. No, not this time. Other times, yeah. I'm a snake. Other times. Right now, this is straightforward. It's okay. We got beginning WIP, which is the first day. Our work in process costs with respect to direct materials here, $54,000. During the period, we added an additional $1,075,050 in cost. Okay? So we can sum those two, and that's our numerator. And we already know TEU is going to be our denominator. So our rate should be that division. Great, we got an answer. Is that okay? Breaking it down, little chunks. Just for fun, let's figure out the conversion cost rate. Let me give you a minute to do that. I'll put this spreadsheet over on my side so you can't see it. And I'll work on it. And after, 30 seconds, a minute, let's see what you come up with for the conversion cost rate. Want a little more time? Anybody want more time? I see people still working but not raising their hand, which means you're like, I'm still working on it, but please stop me. Put me out of my misery here. What do we get? Anybody get a rate? 15.6. That's what I got too. Anybody get different than? If you got different from that, let's go over how we get it. How about that? All right. I won't try to shame you if you got differently. Maybe you'd feel shamed. I don't know. Shouldn't. See, the conversion cost rate is going to be our beginning WIP conversion. I try to be good at that. Hope it doesn't bother you. CC stands for conversion costs. So conversion costs. Conversion cost rate is beginning WIP conversion costs plus current period conversion costs, all divided by the TEU. In fact, TEU with respect to conversion costs. Okay, so I cheated a little bit. I just copied over the cells. And some of you are watching, so maybe you saw what I was doing. Just copied over the cells, changed DM to CC, and tried to delete cost to be non-redundant. And I changed some of the little datos, little information here. So we have 49.5 is our TEU, our denominator, and we have two different numbers here in the numerator under conversion costs compared to direct material. 49,500 beginning WIP, 722,700 rather for current period conversion costs. So the numerator becomes the sum of those 772,200 and divide them. Get 15.6. Is that okay? Once we stepped out of step 1, where we did TEU, we didn't have to worry about the percent completion. the rate step here is just that division. And usually the way I'll get you to get it wrong with the distractors here is by having you pick the wrong numerators. Under weighted average here, it's always the sum of beginning WIP and current period costs. I think these two right here are wrong because they have you sum like all of these together. I bet if we summed all those, we would get that rate over there. Divided by TEU, we get 18. No, maybe not. I forget what I did then. Well, some of the questions anyway have you do the wrong numerators. Okay, questions on what we did? All right, I promised some time for 5-2 if we wanted it. It's probably a good time for a break. We did both styles of question that are going to be on 6-1 here, TEU and the rates after I provide you the TEU. I will warn you, there are questions that have you do both, and I don't give you the TEU. So, nope. For example, here, I give you enough info to figure out TEU right here. That's enough to build a little T account for WIP units and figure out units completed and ending work in process with respect to conversion costs for this question and get TEU with the denominator. And then I give you enough info here to figure out a numerator. And I ask you for the rate, conversion cost per equivalent unit. 6-1 is not so bad. You know, at least in this zone of safety here, where I'm getting used to the problems, it's not so bad. And once you get the knack of it, it won't be so bad either. All right, what 5-2 questions do you want to go over before Interday tomorrow here? Got a quiz. We've got approximated ABC, and we've got TD-ABC. And if there are no requests, that's okay. But if there are, yeah, Sawyer. Approximated. Yeah, let's go over some approximated ABC. First of all, let's see if we got these two questions right, or if I'm off my rocker. Whew. There's my one little portion of validation for the day. All right. We'll open that separately, sure, and then go to the quiz. All right. So the approximate ABC questions are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, 1 through 4 here. There's some that are like more extensive and we do more of the process. Would those be preferred, or what? Any particular ones you're looking for? This one right here? Yeah. The login job? Okay. So this is a more comprehensive question because it's asking us all right, let's step back for a second. We're back in chapter 5. We have a first stage allocation. We get activity rates, second stage allocation. And with approximated ABC in advance, we're doing first stage allocation, and then we're letting the activity cost pools the big ones eat the little ones, and then doing activity rates and multiplying for second stage allocation. So this question right here is asking you to do all of that. It's at the very end, what's the total cost for this one job after second stage allocation? And you've got to start from, here are GL accounts, general ledger accounts, and a percentage table. And it's phrased weird because we have a Western activity and an Eastern activity and a Northern activity and a Southern activity. Okay, so we're going to start. We're going to do, the first part is if it's normal ABC. We have maintenance, so I'm going to put that over here, 1 million. We have admin costs of 1.5 million. We have power costs of 800,000. 800,000. And I'm going to copy over the table. Nice, very pretty. And we can now create activity cost pools like normal ABC. Okay, so we have this. I'll keep the column, there, column absolute. Whoops. And multiply that by our percent. So 50% of the maintenance $1 million is going to the Western activity. Copy that across. 30% is going to Eastern, and so on and so forth. Copy that down to our 3 categories of general ledger. Double check real quick. Got $1 million correctly. Still in maintenance, 1.5 million in admin, and 800,000 in power. Good. We've maintained total cost. We just divided them up into our 4 activities and 1 period cost, activity cost pool. All right, great. Now, let's take a break before we attack this thing. This is so we can get this. These are the denominators, the budgeted drivers for the different cost pools that will help us get rates. But we've got to modify this because got to let the 2 big ones eat the 2 little ones. Okay, so low dollar cost pool in total is $410,000 of the cost, these 2 little ones. Okay, it says using the 2 largest cost pools, not including the other category, which is good because that's a pretty big cost pool, but it's going to be a period cost, so we're just not going to include that. And our high dollar cost pools, oh, it got it right, is that. The 2 big ones. So far, so good? Okay, and now when you get percentages here, of our 2 high dollar cost pools, 55% of it is from the Western cost pool, and 44 or 45% by rounding is the Eastern cost pool. Just within our high dollar, that's how they split up. So that's the proportion of the low dollar cost pools they're going to eat. Okay, so that $410,000, 55% of it, go away. 55% of it is going to be eaten by Western, which ends up being $226,808.51. And 45% of it, rounding of that $410,000, is going to be eaten by the Eastern cost pool, which ends up being $183,191.49, it would round to. So we can add that amount into the original cost pool that we have. We had $1,040,000 just from our normal ABC distribution of costs through the percent table. But also, Western ate some of the smaller cost pools. And so now it is 1.267 million, rounding. And Eastern started out with 840,000 here, but it eats some of the smaller low dollar cost pools. So it ends up with 1,023,000-ish. There. Great. Now we can start developing activity rates with these in the denominator. We can ignore these 2. That's the whole point. That's the whole reason why we would do approximate ABC. So we don't have to track a northern activity or southern activity. Don't have to trace it. Don't have to put it in the system. Don't have to pay accountants to be auditing it or checking it at close, making sure it all ties. That's where the benefit of this method comes. So instead, we're going to do the Western activity has 20,000 budgeted as its budgeted activity driver. That's what it says right here. Budget activity driver for the Western activity cost pool is 20,000. It's right here. And the budgeted activity driver for the Eastern activity cost pool is 90,000 right here. And that's our denominator for our rates. There's a numerator for the rate. Over the denominator for the rate, we end up with these 2 rates right here. 63.34 and 11.37 it would round to. But I'm not rounding it. I want to keep it pure. Let Excel handle many, many, many digits. Instead, now I know that the login job has $65,000 in direct costs. So now we're going to go down to login. So these are our activity rates. This is our normal ABC activity cost pools. This is our low dollar eating. This is our new cost pools. These are our budgeted activity drivers. I'll just call them drivers. And activity rates. So the login job has 65,000 in direct costs. Whoop. And it consumes, here we go. Here's its consumption of the activity drivers. We don't care that it consumes this amount right here. These aren't being tracked anymore. I gave you that to distract you. If it really used that approximate ABC, it wouldn't even track that number, those two numbers. So, instead we have 200, consumes 200 units of whatever this driver is. I don't know, direct labor hours, machine hours, clowns punched, whatever the driver is. Western driver. Please don't assault clowns because I said that. That's my disclaimer. All right, 200 units of that times the rate. We're going to charge for each unit of Western activity driver. We charge $63.34, which means this is our overhead cost allocated from Western activity. Oh, Western. Eastern. And then Eastern driver consumed times its rate gives us overhead costs allocated from Eastern activity. And if we sum, those overhead and the direct cost, because look, it's asking for total cost, not overhead cost, but total cost. If we sum those, and don't put a parentheses right there, that should be our number right there. $79,337.40. So one heartening thing about this is looks like I'm confirmed in the fact that I see a $65,000 difference between this one and this one. That's good. Means I've included the $65,000 and the professor, that mean old professor, was trying to tempt me with one that did not include it, which is just the overhead cost. Nope, don't pick that. It's asking for total cost. Total cost of login job. Is that good, Sawyer? Does that look good?
Yeah, I think the part I'm a little confused. I get the activity rates and how you multiply it by the drivers. So I get the bottom part.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm a little confused kind of from the low dollar area.
Yeah, sure. So we're trying to consolidate activity cost pools. And we figure out what is the total of the low dollar ones that we're going to end up not tracing. And so we want those overhead costs to still be allocated, but we're going to piggyback them on the other big cost pools. So we sum those. So that's our total of low dollar cost pool number right there. We also need to sum the high dollar one because we need to get these percentages right here. So, and it's not a terrible analogy, the idea of them eating each other, because, if you're the lion, let's say, for example, this were 2 million. Let's add an extra million. Now it's 2 million, so you are twice the size plus of the other cost pool. You eat the bulk of it. So the lion gets the kill, eats most of it, and then afterwards some scavengers come in. All right, so the size of the predator here, the size of the cost pool determines how much of the lower dollar cost pools it eats. And that's maybe not your question, but just flesh that idea out. No pun intended. And so then we have these percentages right here that are going to tell us what percent of this low dollar amount we add to each of these activity cost pools. And we go ahead and that's that number right there. That's this percent times that total will give us, that is 55% of the low dollar cost pools. And so we're going to add that to the activity cost pool that we normally have. Does that make sense? That part right there?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I mean, these are costs that literally we did our cost study. We really think those are costs belonging to Northern and Southern, but we really, really don't want to track Northern and Southern cost drivers. So we're going to pretend that Western is doing them. and we're going to push them through the Western activity rate, basically. So we're going to add them to the activity cost pool in Western. I don't know if that rephrasing helps at all.
So you took the sum of Northern and Southern,
Mm-hmm.
and then you took that and multiplied it by the rate of the,
Multiply it by the proportion of the high dollar cost pool that each high dollar cost pool is.
sorry, what was that?
Yeah, no, there's a lot packed into that statement. I multiplied it by these proportions right here. These decimal numbers reflect a proportion. So we have our two high dollar cost pools, 1.04 million and 840,000, and that's the total of them. And so then if I divide that 1.04 by the total, that shows me that 55%, that's the proportion of the total high dollar that Western accounts for. It's the big dog. It's the bigger dog. So we should let it eat 55% of these low dollar cost pools. That's kind of what we're getting to. But yeah, that's what those represent. Okay. You were going though, you were on a roll.
No, that's good. Okay, so then I understand that, and then you took those totals, the low dollar eating totals,
Mhm.
and you just added them to that 188 or that 1,880,000.
We add them to this amount right here.
Oh.
This right here, really, I should move it. I should move it out over here and move this out over here. Total low dollar, total high dollar cost pools. And then this is Western proportion of high dollar cost pools. And this is Eastern proportion of high dollar cost pools. And so when they're out over here, maybe it's a little easier to see that we're really summing just right here. That's all we're doing. And then we could even separate this out a little bit. Yeah, we can, I think. So that it's a little clearer that now we have new dollar amounts as a numerator for these activity rates. These are still the denominators, and we end up with these rates. Is that good there? Okay. Good. All right, what else do we have? What other questions? None? Yes. Yes. Okay. So a TDABC question. Is it like this one? There are some other ones that, let's see if there's another one. I want to do this one actually right here. So the difference between this one and the one above is this one says we don't trace any of these overhead costs to patients, which is the easier version of the question. Let's look at both of them, whatever. Okay, so capacity cost rate, we go down to 5.5. 5.5 is the short section that the entire 5-2 question test quiz is based on. We have TDABC, and I'm just asking you to do the first step of calculating the capacity cost rate, which is simply, where is it? The total overhead cost divided by total practical capacity, whatever it is that we're talking about. The practical capacity is whatever hours number I give you, basically. So like this department, it has 2241 practical capacity as its total nursing hours. The engineering one here has practical capacity of 1250 engineering hours per period. Okay, so CC capacity cost rate, CCR equals total overhead divided by budgeted capacity, which is the hours. All right. Now, the trick of some of these questions is I'm playing word games with what you include in the numerator there as total overhead. So, for example, here, this first question, the hospital does not trace any of these overhead costs to patients, and I say they're overhead costs right here. So all four of these end up in the numerator. Does that make sense? because I told you I don't trace any of them to patients. Tracing means direct. If I trace it to patients, that means it's a direct cost to those patients. I don't have to do any fancy division and allocation to figure out responsibility for the overhead. I traced it. Here, I didn't trace any. Yeah, what's up, Chase? You would sum, yep, exactly. You would sum all 4 of those. So 69719, 15251, 8957, 6106, and sum them, or sum them if you want. Sum those, and we have 2241, and then divide, just like it says. This is total overhead. I want to label it. Total overhead, and this is budgeted capacity. Nursing hours in this example. And just following this equation, total overhead divided by budgeted capacity, gives us the rate of 44.64 when we round. Okay. That look good? And this other one here. So here I use this phrase following costs as opposed to overhead costs. And what I'm trying to get you to see is some of these costs are overhead, some of them are not. Maybe that's a clumsy way of saying it, but that means these costs, some of which are overhead. That's what I mean. So the ones that are overhead are those that are not traced. We trace engineering hours directly to the job. So yeah, engineering salaries, those are direct costs. We can directly charge each job the number of hours of engineering time that was spent. So only the rest of these are overhead. So don't include that 50,000 or you'll get the wrong answer. It's 25,000, 12,500, 80,000, 40,000. Sum those. Get it right? Oh, good. And then 1250. This is our total overhead. Exclude engineer salaries because it's direct. Okay. And this is our budgeted capacity. So we divide them. We get $126 there. Does that look good? All right. Other follow-ups on that? Follow-up is, let's pack up. All right, yeah, we're about out of time. I'm not going to go back to chapter 6 now. What am I thinking? All right, I promised you paper airplanes on Wednesday. We'll do that.